get started with Olia from University of Nicosia, or former Science Center of Excellence. So perhaps it will be a shared presentation, but I believe Olia, you can tell us a little bit more about it, and looking forward to a great session from you.
Thank you very much, Gregor. Is it okay to share a presentation?
Yes, absolutely. Please do.
Okay. Okay, do you see my screen?
We can see your screen.
Okay, that's great. So greetings to everyone. It's my pleasure being here in this final online event of EDUBOTS. I have been involved in the EDUBOTS project as a researcher at the Science Center of Excellence. And our presentation today focuses on the examination of the perceptions of educators and students' potential use and needs for chatbots in higher education through a 2-year study and data collection which take part as part of the EDUBOTS project. So traditionally, software technology development follows standard processes, including a requirements gathering phase and a needs assessment. The latter requires a clear understanding of the end users of the software technology to be developed or refined, users' activities and their surrounding environment. Also, to improve the user experience, it is essential to understand the existing user behavior. So needs are often referred to as gaps, or the difference between what is currently done and what should be performed. One of the objectives of the EDUBOTS project was to explore the needs and expectations of higher education students and educators for the use of chatbots in education. And in the study that I'm going to present you, we try to also identify any potential differences in the needs of educators and students, but also differences among participants from 4 different countries. So while the presence of chatbots on web platforms or standalone applications is already substantial, as already mentioned in the previous discussions, in customer services, in business web pages, in product sales, and in health interventions, their use for educational purpose is still in its infancy. So a meaningful integration of chatbots in higher education presupposes first a good understanding of users' needs and expectations, as well as an examination of their perceptions towards technology, educational technology, the adoption of an appropriate pedagogy, and last but not least, confrontation of any technological challenges and potential limitations that might exist and relate to the natural language processing research field. In this particular study, we will present the key findings for answering to 4 main research questions. So the first one was, what are the educators and students' perceived needs and expectations for their use of chatbots in education? The second one was to see if there are any statistically significant differences in educators and students' perceived needs for the use of chatbots in education. And the third and the fourth one focused on examining whether there are statistically significant differences on educators and students' needs for the use of chatbots in education across 4 different countries: Cyprus, Croatia, Spain, and the UK. To this end, we followed a mixed methods approach involving the collection of qualitative data through semi-structured interviews and quantitative data through a survey across the 4 pilots of the EDUBOTS project. In the first pilot, semi-structured interviews were conducted with 21 higher education users, specifically 10 instructors and 8 undergraduate students from different local universities in Cyprus, and those users had different backgrounds. All the participants consent to anonymously use the data for research purposes, and the aim was to assess their previous experience with chatbots and further understand their habits, preferences, and behavior in relation to the use of chatbots, but also for evaluating their goals, that is their needs and expectations. In addition, interviews were conducted with representatives from our partner institutions, the University of Leeds, University of Zagreb, and University of Granada, with the aim of establishing a shared understanding of the user's needs on the use of chatbots in education. And all the interviews were recorded and then transcribed, and we proceeded with a thematic analysis. In pilots 2, 3, and 4, additional data were collected and analyzed for the needs assessment task. In pilot 2, we collected data through an online survey, which has been constructed accounting on the themes that emerged from the analysis of the data from the first pilot. The survey was prepared in 2 versions, the one targeting higher education educators and the other one targeting the students. And it was also translated in participants' native language when needed. The survey was shared with all academic partners of EDUBOTS so that data from 4 different countries were collected. Then we analyzed the survey data quantitatively through the calculation of descriptive statistics and comparison tests. In addition, as part of the second pilot, we also conducted some semi-structured interviews with 9 participants in total. In pilots 3 and 4, we only collected the survey data and no interviews, as it appeared that from pilot 1 and 2, the same needs were identified repeatedly in the interviews responses. So using the data from all the pilots at the end, we proceeded with comparison tests, specifically independent sample t-test and ANOVA test, to explore any potential differences that might exist in the needs of chatbot users in different countries and among educators and students. And further to the above, as part of our work for the needs assessment, we conducted a thorough user experience analysis upon the pilot of DifferChat and Bo chatbot in pilots 2 and 3, which will not be presented today due to time restrictions. So in the first slides, I will present the key findings that emerged from the analysis of the interviews and the survey data. First of all, findings from the first pilot revealed that interviewees' expectations for the use of chatbots were clustered into different themes. So chatbots were envisioned as facilitators in the teaching and learning process, in supporting formative assessment, remote tutoring, and administrative work. And also chatbots were envisioned as digital assistants in research-related processes, for instance, when preparing a research proposal, and for social bonding with peers. Again, due to time restrictions, I will only focus on the first theme that relates to the facilitation of the teaching and learning process. So in this case, chatbots were envisioned as virtual and digital assistants, helping with the implementation of formative assessment by providing grades and/or qualitative and personalized feedback to the students, but also for conducting short quizzes during an academic semester for assessing students' conceptual understanding. The interviewees mentioned that this need is imperative, especially in large-scale classes, in which the provision of personalized feedback in a formative and qualitative manner during the semester might be an unrealistic scenario. So here I provide some indicative codes that you might see from a student and 2 instructors. Furthermore, student chatbots could add value for offering content support to the students in course-related topics, especially for addressing content-related questions. In this respect, the interviewees consider that chatbots could act as remote tutors, offering tutorials to the students for sharing and filtering relevant to the course resources, and having a mediating role to the instructor to intervene when it's needed. The 24/7 availability of chatbots could then allow students to seek for support at any time of the day. And some of the students refer to the value of having a chatbot acting as a remote tutor, especially for those who study late hours and when it is not possible to directly communicate with the educator. Also, it appears that the students need a facilitator in understanding content-related concepts. And as it was proposed by some of the interviewees, the user could enter some keywords in the conversation, and then the chatbot could filter and retrieve relevant resources. Moreover, a few of the educators stated that there is a need of having a chatbot that responds to frequently asked questions, FAQs, posed by the students. The chatbot should be able to recognize when the educator should intervene in a conversation, and at that point, it should initiate the conversation between the student and the educator. Overall, most of the interviewees acknowledge the potential added value of chatbots in responding to FAQs, either for admin-related topics, for instance, when is the deadline for submission, or for content-related topics. As already mentioned before, based on the core themes that emerged from the thematic analysis, we did from the interview data, we constructed a survey that was used for data collection purposes on a larger scale during pilots 2 to 4. Here you can see the main part of this survey, in which we have clustered the main functions that chatbots could have in education based on interviewees' views, but also based on the relevant literature. So a total of 113 educators participated in the survey across all pilots, out of which 14 were retrieved from Cyprus, 41 from Croatia, 11 from Spain, and 47 from the UK. In relation to their gender, we had 52 educators which were males and 56 females, and 4 individuals preferred not to specify their gender. Their preferred uses of chatbots in higher education are presented in this figure, and a percentage of 47.8% of the respondents consider as very important the use of chatbots for responding to FAQs related to admin topics of a course. A 31% consider also as very important the use of chatbots for addressing FAQs related to content, and a 27.5% consider also as very important the use of chatbots for performing quizzes in the class. A total of 318 students participated in the survey across all pilots. We had 44 students from Cyprus, 171 students from Croatia, 36 from Spain, and 67 from the UK, out of which 142 students were males, and 170 females, and 6 students preferred not to specify. A percentage of 36.2% of the responders consider as very important the use of chatbots for sharing resources relevant to a course. 34.3% also considers as important the use of chatbots for tutoring and for facilitating the communication with the mentors in a class. 32.4% of the students consider as very important the use of chatbots for addressing their content-related questions, while 28.3% and 28.6% consider as very important the use of chatbots for FAQs related to admin matters and FAQs related to course content, respectively. For addressing our second research question, we ran an independent sample t-test, which has revealed that there are differences in educators' and students' perceptions of their needs for the use of chatbots in education. Specifically, it has been revealed that the students assessed as more important the use of chatbots for tutorials compared to educators' responses. And likewise, the students assessed as more important the use of chatbots for responding to content-related questions compared to educators' responses, as well as for facilitating the communication between mentors and students, peer-to-peer interactions in the class, and informal conversations within a class. Differences across countries, Cyprus, Croatia, UK, and Spain, have also been detected. First, one-way ANOVA revealed that there are statistically significant differences in educators' perceptions of their needs for the use of chatbots in education between at least 2 countries, and specifically for the use of chatbots for tutorials. for resources sharing, for responding to FAQs related to admin matters, for responding to FAQs related to course content, and for helping people to find like-minded people. Also, an independent sample t-test was performed because we had missing data from 2 countries for this variable. And it has been shown that educators from Cyprus assessed as more important the use of chatbots for formal conversations compared to educators' responses from Croatia. We also did the post hoc test, specifically Bonferroni test for multiple comparisons, which are not being presented here in detail, but we have a very detailed report with our findings, and will be uploaded in our EDUBOTS website. So if anyone is interested to find more details. For the last research question, we also did a one-way ANOVA, which revealed that there are statistically significant differences in students' perceptions of their needs for the use of chatbots in education. More particularly for the use of chatbots in quizzes, in content-related questions, for ice-breaking activities, for facilitating the communication among mentors and students, and assisting students in finding like-minded people. I didn't mention that before, but in the table here, you can see the mean values and the standard deviation, and with different color, the variables in which we have differences are across the countries. So concluding, we have presented here key findings from the needs analysis study that we did as part of the EDUBOTS project. In this work, we try to identify and explore, as I already mentioned, higher education users' perceptions of their needs and expectations for the use of chatbots in higher education. First through a review of the relevant literature, then through the conduction of the semi-structured interviews in pilots 1 and 2, and then with the completion of the online survey in pilots 2, 3, and 4. Overall, it has been shown that higher education students and educators have several needs related to the teaching and learning processes, also in relation to their research work and social bonding matters, that chatbots could potentially address through an appropriate design. Some of the most preferred use cases for chatbots, as revealed in this study, already exist as a chatbot solution. For instance, the chatbot called Jill Watson, that functions as a teaching assistant to handle forum posts by students enrolled in a computer science course at the University of Georgia. So there are already some solutions, but not covering all the needs as identified in this study. And our participants in this study valued the use of chatbots in higher education overall, but at the same time, they were aware of and knowledgeable of potential limitations that chatbots may have from a development perspective, so as to address their needs. These details have been revealed through the interview data and not presented today in my previous slides. The comparison tests that have been performed on quantitative data, which have been collected across all the pilots, demonstrate those statistically significant differences among educators and students, but also differences among participants from the 4 countries. And those differences could be attributed to participants' different previous experiences with chatbots, and therefore the realization of the real affordances and constraints of chatbots, perhaps to cultural factors and social norms that exist in each country, or to the different educational systems and methodologies that are being used across the different higher education institutions, but also to students and educators' own attributes and characteristics. So concluding, the outcome of this study may have implications for the design, development, and testing of specific pedagogical scenarios for the meaningful integration of chatbots in education. I hope that my presentation was insightful for this event, and I will be glad to add to answer any questions that you may have.
Thanks a lot, Olia. That's great. We perhaps do have a question. Let me think. Let me look. No immediate questions. However, you have put your email addresses, so it's very easy to reach you. So whoever might have a question. Oh, Lars, you have a question.
Just one small question. I noted that in general, looking at the responses from students compared to educators, that students in general reported higher needs or expectations there. What's your thoughts around that?
Well, few of the educators that participated in our study, especially in the interviews, are also researchers and are familiar with chatbots, and some of them were also involved in research projects about chatbots. So they were more aware of the limitations that exist for the development of chatbots, and so I think that this might have affected their perceived needs for the use of chatbots. For instance, even though students were students marked as very important the use of chatbots for tutorials or for answering their content-related questions, an educator could see that there are a lot of constraints in achieving that, and there is a lot of work in terms of artificial intelligence research and machine learning that has to be secured in order to achieve that in a satisfactory manner. So I think that their background and their previous experiences, or what they're doing in terms of their teaching and research at the university for the educators, has affected their responses in this survey.
Thank you. So I see we have a couple more questions here in the comments, but I believe we have to wrap up this session here and give the floor to the next speaker. But thank you a lot, Olia, or Gregor.
It would be great if you perhaps could answer the question in the chat, so everybody sort of could get an idea of what you would answer. But nonetheless, like Lars mentioned, it would be important to move on to the next session.
Okay.
So thank you very much for your contribution. It's a great presentation, and looking forward to many more research topic evolving from the research you did here.